you are.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Here we are once again.
Yes, here we are once again. The ins and outs of menopause with Dr. David Rosensweet. And I am Carolyn Shapiro.
Yes, you are.
Yes, I am. Last time I looked, but I'm not going to look again because I might disappear. Anyway, we have questions. I forgot my water. I might have to jump up and get it. But we have some nice questions. Appreciate your answering them. And how about if I get started?
Sounds good.
All right. Okay, so the first one comes in asking, can my 76-year-old mother take hormones? She's in great health, but starting to get daily headaches.
And the answer is yes. And there's some caveats. And just for openers, we have a video of my 86-year-old mother-in-law. This is many years ago. She had fallen in her kitchen because of loss of muscle strength, sarcopenia. This is what happens as women and men age, and they lose stability, and they don't stand and walk with stability. And she just turned to the right in her kitchen, fell on the hard kitchen tile floor, fractured several bones, was 3 months in rehab. And when she got out, she couldn't get out of a chair. And I started treating her with testosterone and with that. And within about 3 months, we have a video of her sitting on a soft couch with her arms up in the air like this and standing up from a low, soft couch. 86. Started treating my own mother, who had moved to a cane when she was in her late 80s. And she was able to release for a while the cane. So there is a caveat to treating older women. I say treat women whenever you think about it, no matter how old you are. You're liable to stabilize or regain strengths that really matter to you, including bladder stuff, the ability to walk and not have to use a wheelchair. Because when you shift to bladder issues and wheelchairs, many women have to go into assisted living facilities and nursing homes. This is a big deal. Cognitive recovery. Yes, any age. Now here's the caveat. Young women are protected from coronary artery disease and arteriosclerosis. And as I've mentioned many times, it's very rare that you hear of a young woman passing away from a heart attack. Very rare. But it's not that uncommon that you hear of a man in his 40s, never sick a day in his life. He passed away on a tennis court from a heart attack. That's not that uncommon. And the reason is estrogen is very protective to women's arteries. So if a woman goes into menopause and has no hormones till the age of 80, she has a much higher likelihood of developing arteriosclerosis. And here's the issue with arteriosclerosis. It's the clot. When you hear someone die of heart attack, they didn't really die of the arteriosclerosis, but the arteriosclerosis, picture barnacles, for those of you who've seen barnacles. Arteriosclerosis looks like barnacles on the interior of an arterial wall, and those provoke coagulation and clots. And there is a concern, as is expressed in the medical literature, that if a woman has never been on estrogen and you give her estrogen, that if she has a clot, that clot's liable to break loose. And when those clots break loose, that's a problem. And when they break loose in the heart, that's the origin of many heart attacks. So the caveat in treating older women is, do they have arteriosclerosis and do they have a clot? And are you going to provoke a clot? The interesting thing is, you can put a woman at any age on hormones, and if she's going to have problems with the clot that she already has, there's only 1 year that she's at risk. If she makes it beyond a year, there is no longer a statistical risk of that clot breaking loose. Now, it's interesting to me. I've discussed this with many esteemed colleagues, and one of my most esteemed colleagues, who may even be on this particular Facebook, Jim Herntzer, you wonderful man, and expert compounding pharmacist and prescriber and knowledgeable about treating women in menopause and men in andropause. At any rate, he and I were having a discussion one day, and this information about the window of opportunity, that's what it's called. In other words, treat a woman early if you can, get to her as early as you can. We realized this was rather recent information coming out in the last several years. And we thought of all of the women that we treated over the years, never having known this, of so many ages, and women who are at tremendously basic risk for arteriosclerosis. Smokers, I've treated smokers, women who've smoked all of their life. Their risk for arteriosclerosis is very high. I've treated, Jim has treated many women who were at high risk because of being significantly overweight and with diabetes. Women with diabetes and men with diabetes have a very significantly increased risk of arteriosclerosis. So even though there is this concept of window of opportunity, in reality, there's been so many millions of women treated with hormones without knowing about this. And they did fine. So this is not a common thing to report in the literature that you're going to provoke a heart attack. Now, I must say this. These days, when I start treating women who are elderly or are 10 years out with no hormones, that means 10 years away from their last menstrual period and no hormones, they're in menopause, no hormones for 10 years, I know that they're in increased risk, and there I will selectively choose some of those women to get a cardiology workup. And the one that we need is called an echo stress test. That's going to tell us best in least invasive, whether or not there's a clot in a coronary artery that's compromising circulation. Of course, intra-arterial catheterization really shows the clot, but you don't need to go that far. So we evaluate every elderly patient, and if we're concerned that there could be a clot, we will go so far as to refer to a cardiologist, and the test that we want to see is an echo stress test in women. There's different kinds of stress tests in men, but the echo stress test for women. So here's the deal. Treat women at any age, whenever you get around to it. And go slow, because their receptor sites haven't seen hormones for quite a while. So we gradually bring in the hormones and gradually increase over time. And be selective. If there's a concern for coronary arteriosclerosis, then do the workup necessary. Now, back in the day when I treated my 86-year-old at the time mother-in-law, she had had 3 bypass operations from heart attacks. We didn't know, and she did fine. So just to give you an idea of what it's like actually in the field, and she has since passed away in her, bless her heart. But at any rate, yeah, treat women of any age. And if you want to know how I really thought about it, I treated my mother-in-law and my mother.
Says a lot.
So we might think about that.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for that, Dr. Rosensweet. We often talk about that. Second question is, can Dr. Rosensweet please give us insight into ovarian failure? I will be screened for this in the next 3 months.
Yes, and I see that there is a Facebook viewer who this was the mother.
Yes.
Who I always considered my mother-in-law. So, yeah.
Wow.
What an amazing human being.
Aww.
Who said she loved me, and boy, I loved her, and it was an amazing thing. So, yes. Now on to the question of ovarian failure.
Yes.
I've seen that term. Let's look at it this way. There's testicular failure and ovarian failure, if you want to be that gross and harsh about it. I'd like to put it another way. Young women and young men, for that matter, we peak at our hormonal output plus or minus a couple years around the age of 20. And we could say that from that moment on, gradually over time, for certain, we get hormonal decline.
Right.
And when someone's 30 years old, female or male, you're not cruising on the same amount of hormones you were when you were 20.
Right.
And when you get into your 40s, less. And then in all women, there is a moment of the ovaries ceasing to produce hormones. So in every woman, I don't like the word ovarian failure too much. In every woman, somewhere between your mid-30s to your mid-50s, your ovaries stop producing hormones. So let's call it ovarian hormonal output decline, that at some point the ovaries stop producing. And it happens. What determines that age of cessation entirely, that you could call ovarian failure if you want. It's a process where the ovaries stop producing the hormones. And here we are, 2021, and for the last 50 years, we've had remedies for this, or shall I say for the last couple thousand years, because the earliest known hormone replenishment, the Chinese did it.
Mm-hmm.
They collected the urine of young women, and they also collected the urine in a different container of young men, and they dried it out, and the aristocracy were fed or ate or swallowed the dried out urine, because what's left behind in urine, among other things, is hormones. So it's been 1,000+ years that human beings have understood that as we grow older, we can get these hormones through some form or another. Now, thank goodness, we're not dealing with urine. We've got the chemistry and biochemistry has gotten so elegant that we can actually extract from plants and produce the identical hormones that were in the human female or human male.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Bioidentical hormones.
Mm-hmm.
And the process to get them pure is really exquisite. And you can get them in about 8,000 compounding pharmacies in the United States alone. And of course, there's compounders all over the world. So as your hormones start to decline, and I like to think of hormone declination as a good time for a woman, for example, to start paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are symptoms and signs of the declination process, and many women feel these in their 30s. For example, if you had PMS or breast tenderness when you went into when you started menstruating when you were young, and then it disappeared for years or decades, and it disappears because you get into hormonal balance.
Mm.
And then in your 30s, for example, you start getting breast tenderness and PMS again, contrary to popular hope that you're getting younger.
Oh.
With the return of PMS and breast tenderness, that ain't what's happening. I can tell you as a doctor, it ain't happening. In case you wondered and hoped. No, what's happening is you're getting into hormonal diminishing and the consequences thereof, and you're getting into hormonal imbalance issues. So you can start replenishing hormones right then and there in your 30s. And we describe this in the book that Carolyn's put on, Ins and Outs of Menopause, that you can download for no charge, the PDF copy, Happy, Healthy Hormones. We describe this. And so anywhere along the line in the hormone declination process, the earlier the better. before your ovaries stop entirely is best. But whenever you start sensing hormonal decline, start becoming educated on what you need. And you could do that in our book, Happy Healthy Hormones, and there's several other books out there that describe menopause and the perimenopause. Oh, yes, there are. But here's your real job.
Mm.
Identify when you yourself, whether in your 30s or 40s or 50s, you're starting to get hormonal decline symptoms, such as breast tenderness or mood issues or sleep issues. You're a little grouchier than you used to. You're starting to get anxiety. Hey, I'm not an anxious person, you might say to yourself, but I've got anxiety now. That's most likely you're losing your progesterone to balance that estrogen. And this is the time, and here's your job to be able to identify when you start to have issues. And it's not, in some women, it's pretty easy to identify. You get breast tenderness, PMS, anxiety, depression that you never had before. You're in hormonal imbalance, most likely, especially if you're not an anxious type person. And that's the time to get to wake up to this. And the thing to do, and here's your job, is to go shopping, to find a healthcare provider that really is expert in hormones, because the earlier the better, and get an expert. There's a lot of work being done out there. And unfortunately, the whole treating women in menopause and perimenopause, this whole area of medicine has been stunted severely because of the Women's Health Initiative false report. That study was falsely reported, scared millions of women worldwide. So it also scared healthcare providers. So there's very few specialists in treating women in menopause with hormones. So here's your job. Find one. Come to us in the Menopause Method. We're one of those sources where you're going to be dealing with experts who are specializing in this.
Absolutely.
And having said that, almost any hormonal treatment has done a lot of good. Even women who are on Premin and Prempro, they benefited. Now that's not what I would recommend or have ever prescribed in my whole career. But yeah, get thee to hormone replenishing, and don't forget testosterone. Whew! You're going to want testosterone and DHA as much as you're going to want estrogen and progesterone. So hormonal declinopause. One of my partners suggested we should rename the whole hormonal declinopause.
Yeah, I could use that.
Or when the ovaries turn off, it's not a failure. It's that, at a certain time, the testicles start giving out. And how do we know that? We didn't know that until Viagra hit the market. And all of a sudden, you get this tremendous number of Viagra prescriptions being prescribed. Well, right. These men are going through hormonal declinopause.
Mm-hmm.
Big time. They lose their erection, most commonly, unless they intercept it. And here's my testosterone, my beloved testosterone, every day.
Absolutely.
So anyway, yeah.
A question came up and says, what happens if you were on, I'm thinking hormones, and stopped twice before out of fear by a doctor? Can you start hormones again?
Absolutely you can.
Okay.
100% you can. Now, if you've been off for 5 or 10 years, if you go to an expert, we're going to zero in to see, gee, before we restart you, should we really be doing a cardiac workup? It's going to be rare. But in any traditional medical history, like any healthcare provider who has expertise is going to take, they're going to review your medical history with you, and they're going to go rarely, oh my, rather than just launching into startup, maybe we want to do a little bit of coronary artery evaluation on you, a little bit. So yeah, doesn't matter. You how long you stopped them, when you stopped them. If you go to a healthcare provider, the right process to reinstituting them is, yeah, absolutely great. And you might have to go lower and slower if your receptor sites have sort of gone to sleep, gone dormant, so to speak. So there, but yes, absolutely. Get thee back on hormones.
Yes, get thee back on hormones. Okay, so question number 3 comes through, and she is saying, I get palpitations during the progesterone phase. But she also rephrased that question stating, why would the progesterone phase cause palpitations? Do you under?
Yes, that's, for one thing, this questioner is identifying something that I have encountered rarely. Oh, yeah, rarely, but have encountered it. And it always takes us back down to the most important principle in treating women in menopause is individualization. We go woman by woman by woman. We never assume that one dose fits all. In fact, the opposite is true.
Right.
Because women vary individual to individual according to all kinds of things, like what hormones you need and what balance of those hormones and how much each of the estrogens, progesterone, testosterone, and DHEA you need, and how sensitive you are to anything that you're given, and how well you absorb it. There's so many variables. And why am I saying that? You're describing palpitations that can occur with progesterone, rarely, but they can occur. Heart palpitation is really a racing heart. The pulse rate goes up and it beats a little more intensely, so you feel the heart, called palpitations. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it's something we do want to remedy. Well, how we would address you is, you're an individual woman. We would find out what hormonal balance doesn't give you the palpitations. Rocket science, right? The progesterone phase, I want to address that. There are treatment suggestions for treating women in menopause that the hormones be cycled, and thus the progesterone is given primarily in the last 2 weeks of any month. In fact, there's some women that the cycling is continued. The hormone dosages are given so the menstruation continues or is even revived. And what I want you to know is it takes 3 to 8 times the upper limit of normal hormone levels of a woman who's 20 to get that period to come back or to keep it going. And that is very unacceptable to me, because to me that puts you at risk for breast glandular cell proliferation, these robust levels of hormones needed to do it. And because, why am I mentioning it? Because during the progesterone part of the cycle, that gives me a hint that this woman, I may not be correct about this, is using that method and is copying a young woman's process where progesterone comes out 2 weeks of the month. So I'm not going to go in much depth here. And there are exceptions. There's some women who need those robust levels to get their brain to function properly. They're unusual, they're rare, so you never say never in medicine. There is a time when women needs robust levels of estrogen, but to me it's rare, and we want to avoid that in all other women. So for example, some young women, when they're young and they're 20 years old, they have this level, so to speak, of estrogen, and that's what keeps their cycles going, and that's what keeps them normal. And other women need more estrogen. So there's a range in young women as to how much estrogen and progesterone and testosterone need in a normal, healthy cycle. There's a range. This is young women. Here's what we, 99% of the time, we shoot for in a menopausal woman. Right below. These young women, once a month, they're producing breast glandular cell proliferation in preparation for breastfeeding every single cycle. And if they don't get pregnant, that those extra breast glandular cells that were produced, they disappear once a month, as you can feel by breasts that get fuller and then less full in a cycle. Menopausal women, 99%, we're treating below that because we don't need those robust levels. And we don't want to encourage breast glandular cell proliferation. Again, rare exceptions when cognition's at stake. Some women really need robust levels to get these hormone to restore their brain function. So the question was palpitations.
Right, during the progesterone
Yeah.
phase.
So
Or, yeah.
I've had theories about why progesterone would cause heart palpitations. And so get ready, folks. We're going down into the weeds again. Why? And here's my question to you, and many of you have heard this already. Why is it that a woman can tell if she's ovulated or not if she takes her temperature every morning throughout a cycle? Why in the world does that happen? Well, the temperature increases if a woman ovulates, and it does not increase if she does not. Mid-cycle, pretty much, if she ovulates, she's going to get a temperature increase. Why does she get that temperature increase? Because there's a robust, humongous output of progesterone mid-cycle if a woman ovulates.
Interesting.
If she doesn't ovulate, her progesterone levels remain low throughout the whole cycle. If she ovulates, she gets this massive output of progesterone. In fact, 100 times more progesterone than estrogen during every cycle, mid-cycle. Well, does progesterone cause increased heat? Indirectly, it does. Progesterone facilitates the function of thyroid hormone. And thyroid hormone is the principal hormonal governor of metabolism, the rate at which we burn food and create energy and heat. Heat increases because thyroid increases because progesterone is facilitated. Thyroid is facilitated by progesterone output. Thyroid increases. And any physician who treats women or men with thyroid hormone, or any woman or many women who have been put on thyroid hormone, realizes if you take too much thyroid hormone, your pulse rate's going to go up and you're going to get heart palpitations. So this has been my belief, no proof, of why some rare women, if they're not using the optimal dose of progesterone, can get palpitations. But it doesn't matter at all what the reason is. The approach to every single woman in menopause is identical. We individualize every aspect, every moving part. And the first thing I would do, if a woman's getting palpitations and she believes it's through progesterone, we would do an experiment called Don't Take Progesterone. Just take estrogen, testosterone, and DHEA. And if her palpitations totally disappeared, we do another experiment called Let's Take Progesterone, but let's start real low and gradually increase those doses. And we gradually increase the progesterone doses. And if there comes a point where she gets palpitations again, we back down. We just don't administer that dosage, that many milligrams of progesterone every day. We were administering progesterone every day with stoppage once a month of all hormones, but progesterone every day. So we find the right dose by a process called titration.
Right.
We start low, we gradually increase the dose until we get symptoms of excess, and then we back down. And that's how we do it. Now, would that be her final progesterone dose? Maybe not.
Right.
Maybe in 6 months, we try and increase the progesterone a little bit to see if she's still got progesterone, because we will have woken up many more of her progesterone receptor sites, which tend to go down, dormant. That means they go to sleep, or however you want to look at it. Young women have active progesterone receptor sites, but so many women lose their progesterone so early. And women who have had hysterectomies and weren't put on progesterone, their progesterone receptor sites go dormant. So we have to start very low and very slow. And not every woman tolerates progesterone, turns out. So don't worry about it if you don't tolerate it. We love progesterone. 99% of women are going to be able to take progesterone, but if you can't take progesterone, no big deal. We have so many moving parts in our physical body that if your body's not tolerating progesterone, don't criticize yourself for it. Just go on estrogen and testosterone and DHEA and thyroid if you need it. So that's what so any woman who gets palpitations through the usage of progesterone, we don't abandon progesterone entirely. We just start low, gradually increase. If she gets palpitations, that dose is too high, we back down to the no palpitation dose level. She takes progesterone at that level, and then maybe 6 months later, after she's gotten some awakening of her progesterone receptor sites, then we might try and increase the progesterone.
Got it. That one makes sense. It does. Well, thank you very much. This one is interesting. Interesting a question. Talking about getting in the weeds here. Does getting rid of bad bacteria in the gut help with menopausal symptoms?
A very knowledgeable audience.
Don't you know it?
People have been exploring their health.
Yes, sir.
Just like you are, Carolyn Shapiro, going to school again at the age of 26. You're back in school.
I'm 25, and I don't know why.
I'm sorry. I overstated your age there.
That's okay.
Does the intestinal tract and our permanent residents, 3.5 pounds of bacteria that have taken up their home, in fact, who are we really? Are we just ourselves, or are we only ourselves when we include our beneficial bacterial flora? I'd say the self we really want is we include our 3.5 pounds of beneficial bacteria in there. Most people have heard of Acidophilus, and there's many other species. These are extremely friendly and extremely important to us. And they can even be relevant to hormone processing. Oh my God. So there's a certain strain of bacteria that are not our friends, but they can get in there and they can grow. And they produce an enzyme that unbinds estrogen that's made it into our intestinal tract.
Right.
Because our bodies are constantly, our livers are constantly processing estrogens. They're constantly putting those estrogens where? Into both the bloodstream and the stool, via the gallbladder, via bile. And there you go. You've got some estrogen metabolites that wind up in the intestinal tract. No big deal. They're excreted that way. Unless you've got some abnormal bacteria in there that produce an enzyme that splits off the estrogen byproduct from something the liver used to tie it up so it would excrete well. Because one of the things that estrogens and estrogen metabolites are excreted in the feces is in a conjugate form that the liver does so elegantly, called the estrogen and its metabolites up with a molecule called glucuronide.
Can you say it again? You kind of
got estrogen and estrogen metabolite. Yeah, you've got estrogen and estrogen metabolites.
You're kind of freezing, Dr. R.
Linked up in.
I know, I see that he is breaking up, so we're working on it. Dr. R, can you hear me at all?
Liver to make your
Dr. R, can you hear me? Sorry, ladies. Hang on, let me see if I can get with him on my other computer.
Breaking up now, Carolyn?
Yeah, now you are.
Am I breaking up? Am I freezing?
There you are.
I
You're
must be
moving.
freezing.
Yeah. You're frozen. I don't know if you can move a little.
Am I freezing?
I don't know if you're freezing, but you look frozen. And I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Am I freezing? Am I still freezing?
I know we're having a blooper moment. Yeah, you are still freezing.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, smart to. Okay, you're better. I wonder what happens if you speak. I can't hear you.
Am I? Can you hear?
Well, let's hope we can keep you like this.
Repair it, but yes, I can. You can't hear me?
I can hear you now. You're a little fuzzy.
Am I?
Yeah, I can't hear you.
Can you?
Now I
You hear
can.
me?
You're going in and out.
Calling sweet to earth.
Can you hear? Can you not? You want to restart?
Yeah, I'll restart. I'll restart.
Okay, so I'll just close down.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna close down. Send me the link. Send me the link.
I'll email it to you.
Okay. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yay.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you see
Yes.
me?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, there's a glitch for you.
I'm just walking you through my place here.
All right.
Back to the question, because it's a good one and we missed a lot of it,
Sure.
sadly. But the question was, does getting rid of bad bacteria in the gut help with menopausal symptoms?
Yes, yes.
And thank you, ladies, for
And
your
the
patience.
short version is that once hormones are produced and they're circulated around to the whole body and they do their thing, they come back to the liver, and the liver biochemically transforms them and gets rid of a lot of them. Like, for example, it takes estrogen and it metabolizes it. And these biochemicals that are produced from the active estrogen, they're excreted.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are excreted in the kidney, into the urine. In fact, that's how we measure them. Best way, 24-hour urine hormone test. Some of them are excreted into the bowel and thus leave the body via the feces. When they're put into the bowel, they're processed in a certain way by the liver. The estrogen and its metabolites are linked up to these chemicals that make it easier to excrete. And one of the principal one is called glucuronide. So you get these estrogen glucuronide complexes, and they're excreted through the bile into the bowel, and they go out with your stool train. The stool is a train. Well, they go out undisturbed in the healthy state. But if you have some bacteria in your poop, in your intestine, that are not favorable to us,
Mm-hmm.
and they produce this chemical called break up the estrogen complex.
Yeah, that one.
They produce an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase. They break up that glucuronide estrogen and estrogen metabolite complex. They break it up.
Right.
When it's broken up into its components, estrogen and glucuronide, oh my God, it can be reabsorbed into the body through the intestine. So you're messing with your estrogen levels if you've got this unbeneficial bacteria that produces break up your estrogen glucuronide complex, otherwise known as it's producing beta-glucuronidase.
So is that what beta-glucuronidation is? That whole, what you just explained?
Well, what beta-glucuronidation is when your body has done with the beneficial effects of the estrogen that's circulated through your whole body, that blood passes through the liver, and your liver picks up on that and takes that done estrogen and metabolites and links it up so it's excretable. Here's the estrogen and metabolites. Here's the molecule it links it up to. It links it up to several things. It does to sulfate, but it also does it to glucuronide. Links those two up. This thing, this complex of estrogen plus glucuronide is excretable through the bile. Goes through the bile through the bile duct into the small intestine, and then travels down the whole length of the 22 feet of the intestinal tract to go out in your poop train.
Right.
But it doesn't get to go out on that train. It doesn't get to ride that train. Does not get to ride that train if it's broken up. If that beta-glucuronide, that glucuronide estrogen complex is broken up again, then it's small enough to get reabsorbed into the body, because the intestine is a great absorber, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So if you have a bacteria that's producing excessive beta-glucuronidase, you're going to get that wonderful glucuronide, estrogen, estrogen metabolite complex broken up, and it's going to get absorbed into the body, and you're going to get some hormonal imbalances from that. Moral
Yeah.
of the story, does your intestine and the wonderful 3.5 pounds of bacteria that belong there affect your hormone levels? Only if you've got a bacterial imbalance in your intestinal tract. Well, do people get bacterial imbalances in their intestinal tract? You betcha they do. People who take antibiotics, for example, those antibiotics may help your strep throat, but they wind up in the intestine, and they're going to knock off some of those favorable bacteria. And who's going to be able to grow there then? Unfavorable bacteria who were not necessarily sensitive to the penicillin that you took for your strep throat.
Right.
So you get these bacterial flora imbalances. You lose some of your good stuff, and you're left with some of the stuff that was resistant to the antibiotics you took, and you can get imbalances. And another way you can get imbalances is you can overfeed the unbeneficial bacteria.
Right.
Or yeast. They like simple carbohydrates. They like sweets. So big sweet eaters.
Mm-hmm.
People who are addicted to sweets and sodas and colas and all these soft drinks that have just changed the health of the planet Earth. Soft drinks have screwed up the health of the Earth inhabitants called humans. And because they feed those simple carbohydrates, they don't feed your good stuff. They feed the stuff that doesn't belong there, and the stuff that doesn't belong there overgrows. Moral of the story: eat right. Eat good whole foods and don't drink soda pops.
Right.
So don't do sweet stuff.
Keep good
So
health.
it's a big topic. This is the world that you've gotten so interested in, and you're getting your education in right now is to be a health coach. And why is there such focus on the gut? Well, it isn't necessarily because of the effect on hormones, but the gut does affect hormones. And the gut can be a big issue because of the imbalances. Instead of having 3.5 pounds of friendly, lovely, amazing bacteria that we need and love and are really us, they're us. They're part of the we. They're part of the I am. We've got brains and stomachs and hearts, and that's I am physically, and so is our beneficial bacteria, 3.5 pounds. But that beneficial bacteria population can get disrupted by poor diet and by antibiotics.
I mean, I thought it was a really fascinating question that just came out of the blue, and yeah, we could go on and have a zillion interviews on that alone. And I'm sorry that we got a little, finagled there, but we'll figure it out. We will. And we have a few minutes left. I have a question. I want to revisit that question though, and with your permission, I hope that we'll be able to. This question comes in, and we can lead out with this question. I'm 73 years old. I've seen a few doctors, had blood work done, and then a Dutch test, and my numbers varied wildly, so much so it was like night and day. My question is, for someone to do Dr. R's protocol for an older person, as in like elder care, should I be doing 0.25 estradiol daily along with 1 milligram of Biest? My previous MD had me on a 3.75 time-release patch, and I also take 50 milligrams of progesterone. I'm all over the place, and I just really need help with these amounts before purchasing anything because I'm very confused. Thank you very much.
Common story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like reaching out to the world of internal medicine doctors or reaching out to orthopedic surgeons or any specialty you can name. They have a uniform code of practice, every one of those specialties. And there isn't a terrific amount of variation there. So you can almost go to any decent human being who's a physician and is an internist, and you're going to get good care. Now, there's always bad apples, but the majority of healthcare professionals are deeply devoted, deeply caring, deeply committed people.
Absolutely.
You can go to any of these specialties and you're going to get uniform care. Not so with menopause. Menopause received this horrendous body blow where everyone got frightened of it. Women got frightened of it, and healthcare providers got frightened of it. In 2002, with the Women's Health Initiative false reporting of that study, and it stunted the whole development of the specialization called treating with hormones. At a time, it should have been flourishing just like other specialties were flourishing in the 1990s and 1980s. And they were just exploding with the standards of care and routine procedures, not menopause. It's a zoo out there. There's all kinds of approaches. And so having a question and a questionnaire who's confused and has been offered many things is common. But so this is why I always return us to your basic job. It's to find someone you really trust. Start there. You have to go shopping. We're all good at shopping. Most people are good at shopping. It's tedious. You wish you didn't have to do it. Here's where you start. You ask your friends, are you getting treated in menopause? Yes, I am. Do you love your provider? Why, yes, I do. They're just fantastic. They just got right down to it. They took a lot of care. They put in a lot of time and attention, and bam, I'm dialed in. I'm good to go for my whole life here pretty much. That's what you want to hear. You don't want to hear from one of your friends, well, I'm doing it, but it's pretty mysterious to me and I'm all over the place, just like this particular questionnaire reported. This questionnaire is not landed with someone they really trust, and they're just doing what they're being told to do there. So join us in the menopause method. We're specializing. That's what we do. But meanwhile, let me give you some general principles. You are not all over the place testing. What you're telling me is the testing methods used, and I've heard this many, many times, they're not accurate. They're not okay. To cut to the chase, if you were in your 70s and you were going to be tested, the only thing that you're going to really learn from is the 24-hour urine hormone test. Now, blood tests are reliable enough that you could get your basic levels in your 70s. However, you do not need to be tested in your 70s, because here's where your hormone levels are. I'm giving you a test report right now. Here's your test results. Were we to bother testing you, which would be a waste of time and money, all your ovarian hormones, your estrogens, your testosterone, your DHEA, progesterone, take my word for it if you feel like it, they're all super low. So any test that doesn't tell you that your basic hormone levels are super low is a faulty test. Now, blood testing would show you when you're not being treated that you were super low. And 24-hour urine hormone testing would show you that you were super low, but you don't need to know that. We already know that.
Because you know that, yeah.
Every woman in her 70s, every woman who's not being treated is super low. We don't need to know that. Now, you've mentioned different treatment methods. And I forgot the numbers, but in the hands of a provider that really understands hormones, they're going to start you low and they're going to gradually increase you in estrogen. I think that's what you were talking about, the patch and estradiol. And they're going to dial you in until you got the right levels. They're going to know how to do that. It's not my favorite way, but all those things that you mentioned are valuable methods in the hands of someone who knows what they're doing. And then there could come a time, there is a time, once you're saying, wow, I feel better. This is great. I'm 3 to 5 months into this process, and I'm definitely feeling better. Then we do the 24-hour urine hormone test. It is the only test that's going to give you the kind of information that really counts. There's people who will debate me on that. Some will say that you can learn some things from blood tests. Yes, you can learn some things from blood tests. But it's the 24-hour urine hormone test that'll tell us your levels. And there is an optimal zone, and we know what that zone is. And there's a certain laboratory in this planet that is actually published what I extrapolated from the medical literature, which is your green zone, your optimal zone, where you should be in the world of estrogens, and also for the androgens and progesterone. So 24-hour urine hormone test will get you there. Now, to address the confusion you have, I'm not going to go down each method. You mentioned a patch. Patch in the hands of someone who really understands patches and knows how to test levels. That's a decent, it's not my favorite. The patch does not contain estriol. Oh man, that to me is very significant.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of women have benefited on those patches. So if the patch is what you got, you can dial that thing in, because it comes in different dosages. Although I recommend that you read our book, Happy Healthy Hormones, so you learn about estriol. Patch does not contain estriol. Or almost any method you use. And didn't she mention, Carolyn, that a biased was one of her choices?
Yeah, 1 milligram of biased is something that she takes.
Yeah, well, biased, 1 milligram doesn't describe the biased.
Mm-hmm.
Unless she really is taking 1 milligram of bias, which will not be sufficient. Because 20% of the biased is actually estradiol, so that'll be 0.2 of a milligram. That's not enough. Yes, the estriol also counts for something, but not a heck of a lot more. It counts for another 1/10. So that would add up to about 0.3 of a milligram, equivalent to estradiol. If that's what you're taking a day, in my practice, you're going to need somewhere between 0.8 and 2.6 milligrams equivalent to estradiol to do the job. So if it's true that you're taking 1 milligram of biased a day, that's not going to be enough. Not going to be enough to protect your bones or your vagina. And if it's not protecting your bones and vagina, may the Lord help your arteries in your brain.
Yes.
And other things that are
yes.
estrogen.
Yes. Well, so, she's also taking progesterone.
That's good. And 50 milligrams orally is pretty decent dose. May not be the optimal dose, but it's a decent dose. That's for sure.
You know, but she says I'm all over the place, you know?
Yeah, that means she's not getting the kind of results that you want. And we spend between 6 and 20 hours in the first year of consultation trying to dialing in a woman to optimal for each woman. It takes time. It takes knowledge. It takes rigor to get it really good. And then once you get dialed in, every year it's just an hour consultation, maybe a little more, because it rarely changes that much year to year, although we check you year to year. That first year is time intensive for the very purpose of dialing in the proper amount of bias, the proper amount of progesterone, the proper amount of testosterone. Testosterone is a premier female hormone. Don't ever think it's just for males. My God, so much of your well-being and your long-term well-being depends on testosterone and DHEA. So start over, go shopping, or select one of the providers that you feel most comfortable with, that you trust. And if they have the experience, they'll get you dialed in decently. So our time is up. Alas and alack.
Alas and alack. That it is. And it's Thursday, so we have the weekend. I'll get the screenshots. Not quite sure how all this is going to get together. But we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
and it'll all be good. So I want to say thank you to all of the ladies who were here. Possible man, like I always say, thank you, Dr. Rosensweet, always. Thank me. Thank you, Caps, for behaving. And everybody just have a really, really great weekend. I'll get the screenshots, write down the questions. We'll answer them. If we have a glitch, we will fix it. Because we can, right?
Good to see you, Carolyn.
Always good to see you, Dr. R. Have a really great time, everybody. Enjoy. Be good to yourselves. Bye.
Bye-bye.